Welcome to the workshop this morning, and it's all geared around sales, and it's getting to yes faster, getting an answer from your prospective clients. And we're going to be looking at some different techniques to speed up the sales process, in particular the end part of the sales process. Really, it's about closing, and also look at some of the reasons why you may be getting delays in how long it takes to close on some of the sales. So what we're going to be looking at today is, first of all, why it is clients don't sign the contract. What are the things that are causing them to hold back? Secondly, want to look at getting a good fit with your prospects, because this is one of the quickest ways to ensure that you are actually in good alignment with your clients, and therefore there's a good probability that they will actually sign for you. We're going to look at how you can add value during the whole of the sales process. And again, this leads to much greater comfort from your prospective client's position to actually signing up quickly. And lastly, we're going to look at some non-pushy closing skills. So often when you're looking at, in particular, sort of slightly older sales books, they give alternative closing techniques. And I want to look at some of those and let you know why they no longer work, and then look at some alternatives that you can use in real life without appearing to be really pushy. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Nick West. I'm a business coach and consultant. I'm lucky enough to work with clients across North America and in the UK as well. Amongst my clients, I'm very pleased to say that I have multiple award winners. And I've been in business, I'm not sure why it says 29 years. It's actually now 30, just clocked up the 30 mark. And in my own right as well, I am an entrepreneur. I have my own businesses. So I am out there at the coalface as well, selling on a day-to-day basis, as well as advising others as to how they can improve their business and their business skills. So why is it important to make changes to the way in which you sell? One of the things that I find is that as businesses grow, the principals are spending much more time selling and much less time doing the things that they really want to be doing and the reasons they set up the business. So when you can get your clients or prospective clients to sign more quickly, you actually spend less time chasing clients. You spend less time following up on proposals that you've put out. And just as importantly, you're spending less time pulling together proposals, because you now understand much more clearly when a client is a good fit or prospective client is a good fit and when they're not, and therefore when to invest time and when just to walk away. In doing this, you free up time to manage your business much more effectively. That means manage your team, manage your own workload as well. From a personal perspective, I'm a strong believer that if you want to have a successful business, then you have to have business skills. And so this is a great opportunity to look at both your personal and professional skills and build on those. And lastly, when you have a strong sales pipeline and you have the confidence that you are going to close a significant proportion of it, it gives you the freedom and flexibility to say no to substandard clients. One of the things that often draws businesses back down when they're trying to grow is that they feel that they have to work with anybody. And when you really understand how your sales pipeline works, that you can close effectively, that you have those sales skills, it enables you to turn away clients that are potentially a bad fit for the business, less profitable, maybe more time consuming, and that in turn feeds back into you having to spend less time chasing clients. So on to why clients don't actually sign. Just want to sort of take you through a fairly typical story that I get from so many of the people that I work with. And it goes something like this. You have a budding, and I'll call it a romance, with a prospective client, and suddenly it's stalled and you don't know why. All of the meetings that you've had with them have gone really well and you've been very pleased with that, and so on the face of it have they. You've put a great proposal together, you've sent it out to them. Importantly, you believe that the price you've put in there is fair, so that price you don't believe to be an issue. And just as importantly, you've shown them proof that other people have worked with you successfully, whether that's in the form of case studies or testimonials. But there's, as far as you can see, there is no reason why this business relationship shouldn't proceed. But they won't make a decision. And that can be enormously frustrating. You can look at your sales pipeline and you might have $250,000 in your pipeline of proposals you've put out there, but nothing's happening. What can you do about it? So this is really the essence of this. What can you do to make sure that you're closing a good proportion of your outstanding proposals, but most importantly, you're closing them quickly so that you know where you are in terms of your sales funnel? Okay, so 4 reasons that proposals aren't being signed. And this might sound really strange, but one of the main reasons is you haven't asked. And effectively what's happened is you sell, whether it's web design, graphic design, branding, you sell that on a regular basis. But buyers often only buy it rarely. You might, especially in the web design side, you might find they're only buying once every 4 to 5 years. So this is a process that for them is really strange, and they don't know what's supposed to happen next. You haven't asked them, and they're lost now. They're kind of like, well, what do we do? What happens next? Are we supposed to be asking more questions? Are they supposed to be coming up with more information? But because you haven't asked to close and sign that contract, they're just sitting there. They're letting time pass. Another very significant reason is that you haven't shown the real value of making a change, especially if there is somebody else who is supplying them with, let's say, their graphic design, branding, or packaging. If you haven't demonstrated throughout the whole of the sales process that you can deliver more value than the person that's doing it now, there is very little motivation to change. And that is one of the big reasons that people don't sign. So we'll need to look at that within the proposal process. You may be asking for too big a yes early on. And this very much depends on the relative size and relative experience that you have. If you are, let's say, a web design firm and you're used to putting out proposals for $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, and now you're going to a smaller client and you're asking them for 10, you might be thinking, well, that's a relatively small site as far as we're concerned. But to that particular business, that 10,000 may well be a very significant number. And therefore, they have reluctance to sign because you've asked too big a yes. And we'll look at ways in which you can change that way. You can phrase your proposals differently, structure them differently. And lastly, sometimes you've just misread the buying signals. You think that they're ready to buy, you put the proposal in, you're now pushing for a close, but actually they're still thinking about it. And we'll look at some of the buying signals and how you can respond to those a little bit later on. Okay, so these are really the main reasons why people aren't ready to sign. And we'll look at that. We'll look at some of these in a little bit more detail, but you also need to be asking yourself, are there any other things that you are doing in the sales process that are creating friction, causing resistance to them being willing to buy? It's really important that you have a good fit with prospective clients. So I just want to quickly look at what actually makes a good fit. When going through your qualification process, you should really be making sure that prospective clients are as good a fit as possible with the customer persona or customer avatar that you have in place. If you don't have a customer avatar, an ideal customer avatar, this is a really good time to take a step back and work on that. If you're not sure how to go about that, do feel free to get in touch. I have previous workshops and webinars that I can make available to you, which talk in much more detail about building a building a customer avatar and how to go about that based on your existing client base. Size matters in terms of, is a client a good fit for you? More it's if you are a bigger agency and they are a smaller client, you might be asking them to commit more than they are willing to, and you don't realize it because you're big. If you are a small agency trying to sell into a big organization, size matters less. Big firms are much more willing to work with smaller agencies. Often what they want to do is to give them small pieces of work to begin with to see whether they're up to it. And again, selling into bigger organizations, that's something that if you're unsure about, is something I would be more than happy to discuss with you. Do you have a good personality match with the people you're dealing with? When looking at the building blocks of trust for selling, or for sales, one of the things that we look at is the seller persona, and that is the attitude or the approach that you take to selling. Are you too pushy? Are you trying to move too quickly? Are you just a mismatch on a personality-wise with a potential client? You also need to look at things like, do they want or do they expect you to be working weekends and late nights? That may not be a good fit for you. So you need to look at businesses that are in the same kind of vein, the same moral codes that you have, and make sure that there's a personality fit on an individual level, but there's also the personality, if you like, the personality fit on a corporate level. And lastly, have you gone through the qualification process? And this, again, is often a big reason why you get to the end of what you think is a successful sales process and you discover that you haven't, in fact, found out what their budgets are. And your proposal is significantly higher than they can afford. So you have that issue with cost because you haven't qualified them properly. Authority, I'm just going through bands at the moment, so budget, authority, need, and timescale. Are you talking to the person who's actually able to sign off on this contract? If not, then there is obviously going to be a delay because they need to now run this by their superiors who have the signing authority. Have you identified a real need? And in this one, really we're looking at, have you demonstrated the value that the generally marketing materials are going to give to your prospective client? And lastly, timescale. How quickly do they need this? Are they just going out and doing a bit of tire kicking at the moment, trying to find out, are they in the ballpark? Do they really need something at the moment? Or is this something that they're needing next week? So, is their time frame going to fit with your time frame? Fainted is an alternative sales qualification process. There's another one, Scotsman. Again, if you're not sure about those, you can have a look on my website, and there's an extensive blog post on qualifying prospects from a sales perspective. So when you've gone through those points, do you have a good fit? If you have, then you should, in theory, be ready to move forward with closing relatively quickly. So want to go through how you can add value during the sales process. And one of the really important aspects of this is that it moves you from being a salesperson to be seen much more as an advisor. And that's really, really important when it comes to closing, because now they're taking your advice rather than feeling they're being sold to. So I just want to have a look at different ways in which we can approach this. It's really important that you know how the buyer buys and what experience they're going to be going through. So asking what their expectations are, what do they want to get out of this? If they're buying a website, what's the purpose of it? Is it a brochure site, or is it going to be the hub of their digital marketing? If they are looking for signage, then what exactly are they hoping to get from this? Asking these kind of questions early on help you understand the buyer's expectations. Asking them simple questions like, what does success in this situation look like? Or what does failure look like to you? Helps you frame what it is that you do and how you do it much more accurately so that you can frame it as success. And likewise, you can look at what they would think as an unsuccessful, let's say an unsuccessful website launch, and you can make darn sure that it doesn't look like that, that you don't do that. Understand where the buyer is coming from. Different people in organizations are getting different things out of their job, and understanding that if you have the person that has the authorization to sign, what's their emotional experience during this process? What are they really looking for? What are the things that are positive in that experience? What are the things that are negative? Negative things can be having to not give work to an existing designer, somebody they may have worked for some time or worked with for some time. That's a tough thing to do. You're effectively having to fire somebody you've worked with. That's a downside. The upside is that they may get lots of praise and rewards for making a good decision about moving across to a new branding agency, for example, the change that can make. There are career or business opportunities. If it's the owner of a business, bear in mind that every dollar they spend with you is $1 less they have to put in their own pocket. It should, if you've demonstrated value, show that it's an investment and they're going to get a strong return on that investment. So that's, again, really important. But if it's the VP of marketing and their career depends on whether or not they make a good decision about a rebrand and who to do that rebrand, then different things come into play. Now we're looking at somebody's career versus the cash in somebody's bank account. And always remember that buyers like to buy, but they very rarely like to be sold to. And we'll look at some of the closing processes that allow buyers to buy versus the old school approach of when you go in and you try and sell to people. And especially with bigger organizations, it's important that you make sure that your sales process actually is in line with their buying process. There might be certain boxes they need to tick in their buying process. And you need to make sure that you've got the right information to them at the right time so they can tick that box. More often than not, if you're selling to a smaller business, they have no buying process. And that, again, can cause its own problems because now they're lost. We talked about that earlier. Why don't they sign? Because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So think about that. And one thing that you can always do that helps is think about how you can make it easy at every step for them to give a positive response. And often that's breaking your questions down into really easy, small steps for them to deal with. So as you're going through the whole sales process, asking them, does that make sense? Are you happy with that? So that they can come back with a positive yes response to each individual element within a proposal rather than the proposal en masse and pricing. And lastly, just a simple thing, make sure that whatever you send them is in a format that they can read. I remember years ago I was sent a business plan that was so huge with high resolution images that it was actually clogging up my email server. It was massive. It was like an 80-page business plan. When I went back to the individual concerned, I said, you need to reduce this and send it to me as a PDF. They were like, oh, no, you need to get it in this format. End result, that business plan was not going to be approved or accepted by pretty much anyone because it was so huge they weren't going to download it. Now, that's going back, I won't mention how many years, but things like that do make a difference. Are they able to open it? Are you sending them something as a Word document, but they don't use Word? Are you sending them something as a Google Doc, for example, but in reality, they don't have a Google account? Not everyone does. It's surprising these days. So make sure you're making the process as easy for them as possible. And again, we're talking about reducing friction at every step of the process. So think about that. Think how you can do that along the way. It makes the ability for them to say yes that much easier. We want to look at two different sales approaches here, kind of like one that I'm going to describe as old school and one as more consultative. So we've got sales type 1 and sales type 2. And these are broad representations of time invested. Type 1 doesn't spend a great deal of time doing their research. They put together a good presentation and they spend quite a lot of time in meetings with prospective clients. But at the end of the day, they spend a lot of time closing. So in this area down here, because they haven't answered necessarily questions that should be answered early on. The alternative type, the more consultative type, is asking questions throughout the initial stages of building the relationship. So they are really understanding the client's business rather than telling the prospective client about their business. What they end up with is a presentation that is much more tailored to the specific needs of that client rather than the more generic presentation. The actual presentation itself, they may look very, very similar, but one is geared towards that particular prospect and the other, as I say, is much more generic and geared towards maybe an industry sector or size of client. So what you end up with in this situation is the type 2 sales has to spend significantly less time in closing because they've answered so many of those questions up front as part of the discovery, if you like, the discovery phase of selling. So what I want to look at now is some closing techniques and how you can start to apply some of the things that we've talked about in the real world. And what I'm going to kick off with is looking at some pushy sales closes. Often they're sort of kind of thought of as old school sales, if you like. The most common one that you'll come across is the alternate close, and it's kind of like the stereotypical car salesman. You go to the used car lot or even a new car lot and they taking you through this, and then they're able to say, oh, would you like that in white or would you like it in blue? We have a red version over here or we have the green one. Which one would you like? And what they're doing is they're trying to get you to feel awkward because you spent time with them and you used up their time, let alone your own, and they now want you to make a decision based on this one or that one. There's then an approach called the negative sale, and this is one that I really don't like, and the aim behind it is when you spot that a buyer is interested, you almost whisk the opportunity away from them. It's the sign now and we can go ahead with this project. Or if you don't sign now, we aren't going to be able to do this because our production pipeline is going to be full. So what you're doing is you're trying to force them into a corner to get them to sign now, even though there's no actual need, because your production pipeline can be relatively flexible and you could certainly fit them in, but you're trying to force them into that closure. Take it now, or we're going to remove the opportunity of doing this with us. The desperate close. This happens so often when cash flow is poor, and a number of firms will know what I mean by kind of like the peaks and valleys of sales. You go out and you sell and you work really hard, but you're desperate for cash, so you start making offers, ridiculous offers. So the sign now and we can give you a 30% discount. Well, immediately that brings into question the value of what it was you put in your proposal. If you're now prepared to give them 30% off, does that mean that it wasn't really valuable at the price you originally quoted? So it starts to send questions. It starts to put doubt into the buyer's mind. So that desperate close might work with people that are equally desperate because their cash flow isn't great, which doesn't make them good clients, by the way. And for those that had the cash, had the budget, it now raises more questions. There's what I could just sort of describe as, there's never a perfect time. And well, one of the things here is technology changes, fashions change, design changes, flavor of the month, flavor of the year changes. So you can always use the argument, well, there's never a perfect time to buy a website because we're going to see changes in technology. We're going to see changes in design. We're going to see changes in user interaction. We're going to see changes in the way mobile devices, but time goes on. You can come up with so many of these. And so when a potential buyer is hesitant, you can say, well, there will never be a perfect time to buy. So why not buy now? And what you're doing is you're not actually answering their questions or their concerns, is that you're using doubt, you're using continual change as a lever to get them to sign. Not my favorite one. And the last one I'm going to look at here is making assumptions. So the assuming close. So again, they make some positive indication that they're interested in buying, and you move straight in for the great. Well, can we start our discovery meeting on Thursday? Let's say 11 o'clock. So what you're trying to do is to speed up that process by assuming you've already got the contract and you're jumping to the next step. So these are examples of a pushy sales close. As I say, some people feel comfortable using these still, but buyers have become a lot more sophisticated. And you'll see particularly things like the alternate close and the desperate close are very much out of fashion. So if you're using any of these, think about changing them quickly. Okay. So having talked about pushy closes and given you some examples, what are the alternatives? So what are some non-pushy close techniques? The most basic one is a simple ask. And this comes back to, the reason why so many proposals sit unsigned is because you haven't asked the question. So the simple ask, you've gone through everything. Do you have any further questions? No, I don't think we've got any further questions. Are you ready to sign now? And then keep quiet. You want to either have a yes. Well, yeah, of course, let's sign. Or if there's a no, then it gives you the opportunity to ask more questions. Oh, if you're not ready to sign now, What is holding you back from that? And again, you're now into the process of dealing with what are technically called sales objections, and we'll look at some of those later. But it gives you a nice yes, we move forward, or no, okay, we'll take a small step back and we'll answer some more questions so that we can get you to that position where you will ask, are you ready? And they will say yes, and they'll sign. Another one which I really like is, especially if you are a little bit hesitant about asking that, are you ready to sign? You feel that that's too pushy. You can use the, what's the next logical step for you? And then keep quiet. Because if you've answered all their questions, the next logical step for them is to say yes. If you haven't answered all their questions, then the next logical step for them is to come back to you with more questions. Again, you're taking a step back so you can maybe take some smaller steps forward to get to the logical step for them, which is, well, let's proceed. Let's sign. Another one that I like, and this works really well with smaller businesses who don't have the experience of buying design on a regular basis, is you put it into a story format. And you can lead with, well, normally at this point, what our prospective clients do is, and you can take them through that and you lead them through the process. And it might be that the process you suggest to them is, at this point, if we've answered all your questions and you're happy, then you sign. And the next step is we do a final clarification just to make sure that you know exactly what it is we're delivering, when we're starting. We set the dates. We set the first discovery meeting. And you take them through that process step by step so that it's really clear to them what they're doing. Sometimes what will happen at this point is that there are objections. There are reasons why they feel they can't sign at this particular point. And it's really important that you have prepared and you look at common objections and you come up with answers as to what they can be doing or what you should be doing if they have those objections. I will go through that in a lot more detail in a moment. But make sure you're prepared. So one of the things to sit back and think about is put yourself in the client's shoes. You've given them a proposal. What possible objections could they come up with? Well, we'll look at some of those objections, but it's really important that you also think through these. I'll give you some answers here, but take the answers that I'm giving you and expand on them. They are one or two options, but you know your clients better, your prospective clients. What other objections may they come up with? And if so, how do you deal with those? Another thing when doing a non-pushy sales close is look for the ready signals. If you understand what some of those ready signals are, you're in a much, much stronger position to ask that simple question. Are you ready to sign? If you don't understand what those ready signals are, you may feel that you're being way too pushy by asking somebody to sign. But if these ready signals are there and you recognize them, then it's quite reasonable to ask them to sign the contract. And in doing so, you can ask some confirming questions, and I'll give you some examples of those in a moment. So what I want to look at now is some common objections and how you can overcome those ones. The first one, and one of the most common ones that you'll come across, is, oh, the price is too high. Or, we don't want to change our existing designer. We've worked with them for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. They know us really well. We have a great relationship. Maybe they come back and say, well, the timing's not right. Or we need to think it over. And one that will happen quite frequently is we need to get alternative quotes. We need some price comparisons. So how do you answer some of these basic objections that come through? Well, when somebody comes back and says, well, it's too expensive, the price is too high. Very, very simple question to ask in return is too high compared to what? And then keep quiet. And let them think that process through. Now, one of the things that I use as an example, if you do come across this one and they start coming up with suggestions as to why it's too high. Well, oh, your rates are way too high. Or how could you possibly charge $80 an hour for this, or $100 an hour? Is ask them how much they pay per hour to have their vehicle serviced at a car dealership. Now, I don't know about you, but currently I think my dealership charges me about $114 an hour for a technician to come along, plug in the diagnostic tool into my vehicle and tell me X, Y, Z. $115 an hour. So are you too expensive because your prices are lower than the technician at a vehicle dealership? When you've demonstrated there's a rate of return on what you're doing, their investment of $10,000 in the website, their investment of $20,000 in rebranding is going to reap significant rewards. So the price is too high. It's very much a subjective question. You need to keep quiet and let them answer that, because when they stop and think about it, or when you're able to give them alternatives, give them some comparisons, they will realize, in fact, that you're not expensive at all. In fact, you are really good value if you have continued to demonstrate that value throughout the buying process. So what happens when they say, well, I don't want to change my existing designer? It's really, really important you find out the specific reasons why. And it might be something really as basic as, oh, actually, my daughter does all my design work. It's a family member. Or they helped us out when we had financial difficulties and we couldn't pay them. It might be that they have a barter relationship, so they don't actually have to part with any money. But when you find out what those specific reasons are, then it gives you a much greater opportunity to answer those questions. So what if the timing's not right? Firstly, when a business comes back and says the timing's not right, once you've gone through the whole process and you've qualified them and you've identified that there's a need and you've identified that the timescale works for the two of you, this is stalling, and they're really trying to not give you an answer. Oh, timing's not great for us. Can we talk about this in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, next year, next budget year? They're just trying to let you down gently. The reality is you need to find out why you haven't convinced them that the time is right now. Often this is down to you. And what I would suggest, and here's an interesting exercise to do if you're getting this frequently from prospects, is to go back through your proposals and just have a sheet of paper with 2 columns on it. And on one side you write client, and the other side you write me. And as you go through the proposal, look at how many times you talk about the client, and every time you do, put a tick mark or mark of some kind in the client side. And every time you're talking about me, put it in the me column. If when you've gone through the proposal, you find you've got significantly more tick marks in the me column than you have in the client column, then switch back. You are a type 1 buyer. You haven't gone out and asked specific questions. You haven't tailored your proposal to the client. You haven't demonstrated value. What you've done is talk about yourself. And that might be how technically wonderful you are. The fact that you can use Photoshop, you can use Adobe Illustrator, you can use the whole range of Creative Suite. They don't care. What they want to know is that the end product is going to meet their needs and their prospective client needs, because mostly we're creating marketing collateral, marketing materials on a business-to-business basis. So if you haven't demonstrated the value in your proposal and all you've done is talk about your strengths and your skills and how wonderful you are, you need to review the way in which you're doing your proposals so that when you do that exercise, there are significantly more ticks in the client column than there are in the me column. Clients these days do their research before they come and talk to you. They wouldn't even talk to you if they didn't think you were capable of doing it. So if timing is not right, it means that you usually haven't demonstrated the value of making a change now. Okay. Need to think it over. Again, need to think it over sometimes is a bit of a stalling technique, but often it means you're talking to the wrong person. They don't have the authority to move forward with this. One good way to get around this is get approval from that particular person so that, you know, they've ticked the boxes. Is the price right? What we're delivering is right. Timing is right. So now you've got basically their yes to move forward. Now you want to get them on your team, or you want to be on their team. And now it's we. What do we need to do next to get all of the people who can approve this project in the room at the same time to run through and get approval? Really make it now you're working with them. It's collaborative selling. It's not, oh, you can't sign it. Well, who do I talk to? Get them on side. Help them sell for you to their colleagues. And the last common objection is, you know, we need to get alternative quotes. And sometimes that is company policy. You know, they need to have 3 proposals to choose from. And sometimes it's just kind of like rubber stamping it at that point. Yes, they'll get them. The bad thing is if you are one of those firms they approach to get an alternative quote from, that can suck. You can put a lot of time into a proposal, but all they're doing is going through the motions. You'll find this a lot with charities, government bodies, government itself, that they have to go through this process of looking for alternative quotes. So one of the things to do at this point is to really be asking questions. Understand their buying process. So are you getting alternative quotes because you need to have 2, 3, 5 for comparative purposes? Or is it that they are concerned about price or functionality or deliverability? Because if it comes down to price or what it is you're delivering, again, have you demonstrated value? If not, you need to go back, take small steps back and think, what do I need to do to show them what I've done or what I can do for them is going to deliver? And if it's about price, then again, you need to be A, looking at, are you demonstrating value? And B, maybe look at payment terms. Different payment methods can work very effectively when somebody is thinking of alternative quotes. And the last one that you can use is get them to talk to your existing customers. Do you have 2 or 3 clients, maybe in broadly similar industries, similar businesses, that they could talk to that will back up your ability to do what you said you're going to do and who've had really good results? And that offering of references often will get people to step back from asking for alternative quotes and like, oh, well, yeah, I can follow up with those references and we'll let you know. But again, you need to be proactive about that. Once they've got references, go back to them within a few days and say, have you had a chance to speak to Sarah, to Joe? Do you have any questions based on that? So these are some relatively simple techniques to overcome some of the most common objections that you might come across, some of the most common reasons that people don't sign on the dotted line. I want to look at some ready signals, and this is the last thing that we'll look at today, and then we'll throw it open to questions if anyone has any. And the idea behind the ready signals is, as a salesperson, if you can identify some of these ready signals, it means you're in a much stronger position to be asking the closing questions, going into your soft close or non-pushy closing routine. So things to look for here are questions like, when can we start? Are they talking about specific delivery dates? Oh, you know, we would need the website to be ready for the launch of this new product on April the 30th, for example. They're now getting very specific. It's not generic. And one of the things you can do is, and I talked a little bit earlier about confirming questions. So if they come in and say, oh, you know, will you have this, we need this brochure for a trade show on 30th of April. Brilliant. You don't just say, yes, we can do that. You say, just to confirm, so you need this ready for the 30th of April. Is that right? You're using confirming questions to back up these ready signals. Yes, that's what we need. Bang. You have a ready signal. If there are specific price or rate questions, not general ones like, oh, you know, this is too expensive, but there might be specific questions like, well, is design the same price as production? Are we paying the same hourly rate? Is is branding strategy priced at the same level as production, producing the business card, for example? When you get into these very specific questions, it means that they've moved beyond we're not sure to now we just want to nail down a few very, very detailed and very specific things. So again, come back to them with good answers, honest answers as to how you've priced things. If when you run through a proposal, they want to come back and they want to look at very specific parts of that proposal, it means that the bulk of the proposal is accepted and they're happy with it, but now there are just one or two areas where they want further clarification. They need a little bit more information. So that is it's a ready signal. It's not 100% ready because you need to answer the questions on those specific parts, but in general terms, you are now looking at somebody who is an active buyer. And if they ask for references, asking for references is a really, really good sign that they're ready to move forwards. When you see these and when you have answered their specific questions in there, use the confirming questions. It is now time to ask for the sale. And that's the biggest single thing that you can do, is pluck up courage and ask for it.